Okay, I'm going to the desert and I'm gonna steal everything that is that she can have, that I'm gonna steal like a monkey in the desert, that is that she can have, that no one can against me, give me the gold. Of course, world is yours and you have to find the capital letters and let them, so don't come with a big gun, that is what she can have because it doesn't work. Of course, that is what she can have. That world is yours, you have to find the capital letters and let them, and don't come with big guns because I'm gonna write in capital letters. World is yours and you're gonna read it really right. That is what she can have, that no one can against me. Of course, I'm gonna write in capital letters. World is yours and you're not gonna come with a big gun, motherfucker. Of course, that is what she can have, that I'm making some loops. That is what she can have, that no one can against me, that I'm going to the desert. That is what she can have, of course, that is what she can see, that no one can against me. So come on, of course I'm going to the desert and I'm gonna steal the whole gold. That is what she can have, that no one can against me. Of course, motherfuckers, what do you think? Of course, that is what she can see. You want to sell some oil? Of course, motherfucker, sell some oil. That is what she can have. Of course, I'm selling it at the right price. I'm not sell it cheap to the West, and that they build you some towers and let you all hungry with some towers for the millionaires. Of course, that is what she can have. Sell the oil at the fair price. Of course, motherfucker, sell the oil at the fair price. Of course, motherfucker, that is what she can have. That if not, they are gonna steal you everything. That is what she can have. That you're gonna sell it cheap to the West, and they are gonna build you some towers for the millionaires, and they are gonna let you all hungry in the hood. Of course, motherfucker, sell the oil at the fair price and make some things for the hood, have a strong state. Of course, that is what you can have. I already told you, you can see many things. Of course, that is what you can have, that you can see my system and my skills page. Of course, motherfucker, I don't give a damn. You can touch me if you want. I'm not gonna say anything to you. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that I let myself touch. Of course, that is what you can say, that I let the people touch me. I give a damn. That is what you can have. Of course, and I buy this brown horse. Of course, I'm a pure blood. Of course, that is what you can have, that I'm the first line from horses. Of course, I'm gonna have all the rainbow. Of course, that is what you can have, but the boy is the second. He's gonna cash some tangerines. Of course, that is what she can have, that no one can against him. Of course, he's gonna catch some tangerines and no one is gonna say him he can't. That is what she can have. If the boy wants some tangerines, give him some tangerines, motherfucker. That is what she can have, because can the boy not have some tangerines? Of course, motherfucker, that is what she can have, that I give it them. Of course, that is what she can see. Of course, that is what she can have, that they are after me. Of course, but I'm with police control. Of course, that is what she can have, that I have police control. That is Of course, I have police control. Of course, that the police is even looking at my thoughts. Of course, that is what she can have. I had impure thoughts, maybe yes. Of course, that is what she can have, but I never did nothing. Of course, and impure thoughts, I always hope they don't shoot me in the street. Of course, I have some knives. Of course, I have some knives to protect myself from the people in the street. Of course, I don't wanna die. I don't wanna be shot at the school. I don't want that someone makes me a scar with a knife. Of course, that is what you can have. This why I have my knives to protect myself. Of course, and I'm selling some Not broke candy for the ladies in the Paris, of course, that's what she can have. That we are here, retired in the clinic, taking some pills like the ladies dragged in the parties, of course, that is what she can have. Selling some not broke candy so the girls don't feel broke, of course. And you know, if you sometimes took some of my candy, you can see if you cash, of course, and let it there, or you can hit me, or you can go to if you cash, because they are gonna hang you, and I give you some cash, and if you cash, so you don't be hurt, of course. And there you go. And of course, that is what she can have, that no one can against me, so come on. And of course, that is what she can see, so go on. That is what she can have. Of course, and if the boy wants some gold, give him some gold. Why don't he can have some gold and have some tangerines? Of course, like I told you, I have police control. They are looking at my thought, of course. I always try to be clean even in my thoughts, and it's a difficult thing, of course, but I'm taking some tangerines and trying to keep clean in my head. Of course, that is what you can have. The police even look at my thoughts, so what can I do? Nothing. Of course, I'm just here trying to have my head clean. Of course, that is what you can have. That if the boy wants some tangerines, give him some tangerines. Of course, that is what you can have. That no one can against us. Of course, that is what you can see. That no one can against us. So come on. Of course, that is what you can have. That no one can against us. So come on. Of course, that is what you can see. That we are right. That we are fine. That no one can against us. So come on. Of course, that is what you can see. That if the boy wants some gold and some tangerines, give him some gold and some tangerines. Why can he not have? Of course, that is what you can have. That world is yours, and you have to see it with big capital letters, and don't come with big guns crossing no one, because you have to see the capital letters from world is yours. Of course, I'm lost. I'm gonna steal the whole gold. Of course, that is what you can have. That no one can against me. Of course, I have a big gun, but a big age gun. Of course, motherfuckers, I give it that. I'm giving you some loops. Of course, that is what you can have. And if you want to touch me, motherfucker, give it them. Of course, that is what she can have, that no one can against me. Of course, that is what she can see, that if you want some more, just take some more. Of course, motherfucker, that is what she can have, that no one can against us. So come on, Mr. Dewa, at a fair price, of course, to build up the hood and not sell it cheap to the west for 2 coins. They build some towers there in the west, in the east, in the Middle East. They build some towers, of course. That is what you can have, and you don't have nothing in the hood. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, keep the sources, sell it, and make some strong state to have the money from the oil well shared, of course. That is what you can have, that no one can against us, of course. That is what you can see, that I'm gonna steal in the desert, of course. That is what you can have, that I'm gonna steal in the desert, of course. World is yours, and you have to see the big gun with capital letters. Don't cross me, of course. Some globes, of course. That is what you can have, that if they bound some gold and some tangerines, I'm gonna give him some gold and some tangerines, of course. That is what you can have, that we are here in See My Heart, of course. We are here in See My Heart, of course. We are here in NDA, we are here riding, of course. That is what you can have, that no one can against us. So come on, of course. That is what you can see, that we are fine, of course. Of course, if the boy wants some tangerines and some gold, just give him some tangerines and some gold. What are you gonna say against him? Of course, if the boy wants some tangerines and some gold, just give him everything. Of course, you know where it is yours and that you have to find the capital letters with the big N of don't trust me, motherfucker. Of course, I'm telling you some loops. What is going on? Are you not seeing it? Of course, you don't feel the loop. Of course, that is the loop, motherfucker. Of course, that is what you can have, that I'm gonna steal in the desert. Of course, if the boy wants some gold and some tangerines, just give him some gold and some tangerines, motherfucker, why not? Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against us, so come on. Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against him. Of course, if the boy wants some gold and some tangerines, just give him some gold and some tangerines, motherfucker, that is what you can have, that he's gonna steal the whole gold. Of course, that is what you can see, that I told you that the police is in my head, looking at for my thoughts, and I'm trying to keep clean. Of course, and I hope they change the president soon, because if not, I'm gonna be the most wanted in the whole planet. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, motherfucker, that is what you can have. That I have to tool who says Woad is yours with big capital letters and a big gun who says don't cross me. Of course, motherfucker, you don't see the loop. Of course, motherfucker, I'm gonna steal the whole gold and the whole tangerines. Of course, that is what you can have, that I'm trying to keep my head clean. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. Of course, motherfuckers, I'm stealing in the desert. That is what you can have, that no one can against me. So come on, of course, that is what you can see, that we're gonna go. Of course, that is what you can have. It's over, of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. Of course, touch me if you want, I'm not gonna make a case for touching me. Of course, motherfucker, I'm less for touch. Of course, I'm trying to keep my thoughts clean, but if you are dirty with me, I give it then. Of course, I hate people who makes you dirty. Of course, that is what you can have, that I try to keep clean, but if you are dirty with me, I give it them. Just be dirty with me, I give it them. That is what you can have, that I'm not gonna make a case for being dirty with me. Of course, I try to keep my head clean, but you know, so it's like no one can against us. Of course, that is what you can have, that if you have some oil, just sell it at a fair price and make a strong state to share everything right. Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against us. Of course, motherfucker, you know that world is yours and it is rotten with big capital letters. I have a gun, don't cross me, that is what you can have. Of course, that is what you can see, that no one can against us. Of course, that is what you can have, that I'm gonna steal the whole gold. Of course, that is what you can have, that no one can against me. So come on, of course, that is what you can see, that I have the tangerines. Of course, I'm gonna steal some gold and some tangerines. Of course, that is what you can have. Of course, I'm the most wanted, trying to keep my head clean. Of course, motherfuckers, that no one can against me. So go on. Of course, that is what you can have. See you soon. Of course, see you. Bye.